As you may know from my last one, I am Blake Thompson. I'm the OAB ABIP inspector, and I've been working in radio and TV now for almost 40 years. We have now, this breakout session is how to overcome the challenge in generating significant digital revenue for station websites, OTT, and mobile. That's a big challenge for all of us, and I hope we can all learn something here today from Henry. Henry, what was the last name? Quintana has been in the broadcast industry for 18 years. He rejoined Bitcentral in 2016 from TVU Networks and previously managed the conversion of the CNN news source to distribution network to an IP-based platform. Prior to that, he was Director of Operations for Media General, now Nexstar, NBC affiliate in Raleigh, North Carolina, where he led the transition to a nonlinear continuous newsroom workflow. Started in the broadcast industry with NBC Telemundo in Miami, Florida, and we're pleased to have Henry here with us today from Bitcentral.
Hello, everyone. I'm also joined by Wayne Strand, who's standing in the back of the room, probably known to many of you. He is our Senior Director of Sales for the region. So thank you for your time. And I promise no pop quiz, so if you guys want to get a little closer here, feel free. So today I'm going to obviously talk to you about digital revenue for your streaming platforms. And going to speak about some best practices and things to consider as you undertake some changes and add some monetization options for your digital streaming platforms, whether those are for your websites, for your mobile apps, or for OTT apps. So why Bitcentral? Why am I here? Well, hopefully we're known to many of you. We have been in the broadcast industry for a little over 20 years. Today we're the leading provider of news production and workflow services across the domestic U.S. News producing footprint. Every day about half of domestic news producing TV stations are using Bitcentral products in their workflows, and hopefully that number will be increasing in the future. Additionally, we pride ourselves on listening to our customers, and the solutions that we bring and the solutions that we develop are based on the needs of those customers. So today, please feel free to interrupt me, ask questions, or interject with thoughts as I go along. So why are we here? We have found three industry-wide issues that are plaguing anyone in the content-producing business, not just traditional news-producing stations, but content producers in general, when streaming out to digital platforms. Those are audience engagement around those online platforms, or lack of audience engagement, I should say. Revenue generation opportunities via advertising, sponsorships, et cetera. And then, of course, workflow inefficiencies around getting content out to digital platforms. So, first, and starting with that audience engagement, want to talk about today's modern viewer. Right? Many viewers today are used to having solutions at their fingertips, like DVR functionality on the online space. With the preponderance of mobile apps and OTT apps. And then, of course, with social media destinations, viewers are used to getting what they want when they want. And so our solutions, our digital streams, our digital platforms need to engage and retain those viewers by doing exactly that, right? We need to give our viewers what they want and when they want it, and most importantly, maintain a broadcast quality or a high-quality viewing experience for those modern viewers. Now, some ways to earn revenue around that content, of course, is by leveraging both local and national spots when you produce those streams, right? Many stations are relying on their local sales team to, of course, sell into broadcast space, but those same sales teams should be able to sell into digital space as well. And that content can then be filled or backfilled with integrated ad networks at a national level. Okay. Managing ads server side as opposed to client side is a definite key point in maintaining a high-quality streaming or linear-like viewing experience. In addition, maintaining server-side ad playback means that your streams and your mobile solutions will be largely immune to ad blocking and to ad stopping workflows or players. And then finally, we do want to make sure that those ads are inserted in a linear-like stream, right? So give viewers what they're used to in the TV world with a constant stream of content mixed with ads. So one way that we have put that into practice is by creating what we call dynamic streaming channels. And these are channels that are produced by a number of file-based assets interspersed, again, with ads and promos and sponsorships to produce what we call a linear on-demand stream. So to a viewer, it acts like a TV channel. When a viewer comes into a linear on-demand stream, they start getting content immediately, and that content will continue to play while they're in the stream. So until a viewer, in effect, changes the channel, just like if they come to one of our TV stations, they should get a similar experience. This is opposed to the traditional VOD model, where viewers will see a bit of content, maybe a pre-roll, maybe a post-roll ad, and then get ejected into a carousel or another video chooser that will generally cause a break in viewing and a break in consumption, which breaks down your audience engagement and your viewing time. Additionally, we've found through our studies and practices that the pre-roll concept of ads for digital streaming generally doesn't work. We're seeing upwards of 25% of viewers abandoning streams in the pre-roll, right? This means that one ad impression is causing your viewers to leave the stream, they're not seeing your content, and then, of course, they're not seeing additional opportunities for monetization via further ads. So what we found is that you should be starting each of your streams with either a short cold open, animation, or maybe a short sponsorship opportunity as opposed to a pre-roll ad. What that looks like from a content model is pieces of content interspersed with those ads and transitions to, again, produce a linear TV-like or news broadcast-like experience. And all of this, of course, should hopefully be automated via your workflow. So as an example, we have here a short video from one of our early launch partners. So this is from KSL. And this is an example of how a linear stream put together out of file-based assets with system-inserted transitions and ads should look, right? This content has been shortened for time, so I'm not going to sit here for 10 minutes. But what you'll see is a number of news stories, an automated transition between those pieces of content. Here we're in our second news story. We'll have another transition and then seamlessly go into an ad, right? So again, from a viewer standpoint, perhaps I've come into a stream or an OTT app or even a web page via a link to a story in particular, but I'm going to keep getting content, keep getting some short ads, and then this will transition back to more content, and will continue to do so until I, as a viewer, choose to switch the channel or switch away. Okay. Again, coming out of, this is great video, yeah. Yeah, road signs in Eastern Europe are not what they're cracked up to be. So again, more news content, a natural transition. We even have some lower thirds there, in this case generated by the metadata around the content. And another transition. This is an end transition for that block of content, another commercial, and so on. Right? So hopefully you get the idea of how this looks like a linear stream, just like a channel would. But it is all based on file-based assets and metadata around those assets that's building that stream. So as a viewer, when I enter it, I get content from the top or from the start of that particular piece of content, and then continue in this natural stream fashion until I switch away. Now, on the live side, for live streaming, what we often see is something like this. Right? This is one of our customers, so I'm picking on them. Where, as a viewer, maybe I go to a website or an OTT app, and I'm watching their news being streamed, and then we get to a black slate with this, "We'll be right back." Right? Obviously, this is a lost opportunity for ad generation and monetization around the live streaming. So when you think about putting a workflow in place that is going to handle your streaming solution, you need to think about the live piece as well as the file-based piece. And again here, we have an example of how you should think about the live end of things, right? Again, kind of going back to today's modern viewers, they are sophisticated. They are used to getting content in ways and times of their choosing. So what we want to think about is, with regards to live content, whether that's news or other locally produced content, having the ability to monetize and insert ads based around the live schedule when you are live, but then the ability to replay and maybe slipstream some of those ad blocks to shorter times when you're in replay, right? As a viewer, obviously you don't have the ability to, or as a streamer, we don't have the ability to give viewers shorter ad breaks when we're live or near live, because we're, of course, relying on the broadcast schedule to do that. But on replays, when the news is perhaps an hour or a few hours old, we don't necessarily want to give viewers a 3 or 4 minute ad block, knowing that they might switch away at that time, right? So live and near live, we need to think about systems that have the ability to intercut and insert ads based around the same traffic schedule that you have for your live program. And then on replays, think about shortening those and cutting those down to maybe a minute or a number of shorter spots. So some tips on how we do this and how we keep content fresh, right? Again, kind of a little bit of a differentiation between file-based and live content, but with file-based content, we want to think about updating that every day, right? And that means weekends as well as during the week. So we do need to have and think about having operators or producers assigned to put content up, and then to have a backup for those producers, right? It's kind of not acceptable to this day and age to have a live stream that goes stale from Friday to Monday. Additionally, you do want to think about a digital first and a digital last workflow, right? So what that means is your viewers that are coming to your properties are not necessarily to your digital properties, I should say, are not necessarily the viewers that are coming to your on-air properties, right? So holding that package that comes in at noon for the 5 o'clock news is really not helping yourselves, right? Those two viewers are often unique, and a viewer that comes to your website at 3 in the afternoon is not necessarily the viewer that's coming to your broadcast channel at 5 in the afternoon or at 6 in the evening, right? So you do want to think about having content go up onto your digital properties as soon as it's available, but then also think about updating that or clipping updates from your newscasts post-air. Okay? On the live side, this is critical here, is implementing a set and forget solution, right? The workflow that feeds your live news streams needs to be almost invisible to your staff. That said, you do want to think about having live and file-based content intermixed if you have large blocks of time without live news programming, right? So again, kind of the weekend example, if I have a morning show and a late evening show but nothing in the middle of the day, it's probably of little value to viewers to see a replay of the morning show at 2 in the afternoon. Right? So that's where you have the opportunity to intermix and change out your file-based content into your live streams, again, on those replays throughout the day. Additional options to think about are, in lieu of pre-rolls, to think about short sponsorships. Right? This video is brought to you by Option. Right? So not a pre-roll per se, a short animated transition at the top of your content that can act as an intro animation, an open into your content. That can be for traditional news content. That could be for entertainment programming, household programming, lifestyle content. And then you also have opportunities in the digital space to bring in content from other networks, right? Outdoor channels, do-it-yourself channels. All of this content can be intermixed into channels on your digital properties, right? We're not limited to a single 24-hour-a-day broadcast. We're effectively unlimited in the number of channels, topics, and variety of content that we can put on our digital space. So think about reaching out to other content producers and getting their content into the channels, into the topics, into the streams that you have throughout your properties. Right? Other locations to think about producing content, to think about hosting or building sponsorship opportunities around colleges and universities, medical centers. These are generally content producing entities that don't have the expertise that we as broadcasters do in how to produce and how to distribute content. So there are opportunities there for engaging with those local universities and, again, medical centers to pick from and to work with on getting more content and having more channels and streams available that, again, you can take full opportunities in inserting ads and monetizing. Additionally, of course, there's the sports option. Many local TV stations partner with the local high school communities to replay high school football games. As little as I know about sports here in Ohio, I know that OSU is up the street, so we have obviously colleges and universities available to us to work with and partner with and pull from. And it doesn't necessarily need to be full game content, which obviously many times we don't have rights to. It can be highlights. It can be content that is locally produced around your partnerships and your integrations with your local schools and universities. So another example here I have of another video stream, again, kind of built around the sports model. Again, following the linear stream, we started this time with a sponsorship. Again, no pre-roll. We have a couple of highlight clips here, obviously soccer this time. Again, this is a linear stream built on some file-based assets. We'll have some custom transitions between each piece of content. And there you go, there's the first one. And that not only makes that transition from piece of content to the next piece of content seamless for the viewer, but in the case of something like a sports highlight, indicates that it is a new piece of content. Right? We'll get a few more minutes or a few more seconds of video here, and then another transition into an ad block, which, just to reinforce one more time, is again a linear experience which will look to a streaming or a digital viewer like what they're used to seeing from our on-air properties. So in this case, we close with a sponsored animation, and then we go into an ad. Right? This particular piece was put together with some Coca-Cola assets, so that's what we're getting here. But with the animations and those sponsorship opportunities, those don't necessarily need to always match. Okay. Again, some more content, another transition. Hopefully you get the idea here. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the workflow side of how to think about your streaming solutions and implementing these opportunities. Some items to consider, some things to consider with the workflow end of things are having a cloud-based or at least a web-based accessible solution, right? In the streaming space, in the digital space, generally, we have many content producers and many publishers throughout our workflows that are touching either the content generation, the content metadata, the content publishing, or the approval process. So we want to think about having a solution in place that will let all of those producers manage that part of the workflow from wherever they are, hopefully from the field as well as from in the studio, but definitely from any computer or definitely any workspace in your facility. You do want to think about having an intuitive or an easy-to-use workflow, having to train and retrain staff in how to publish content, how to get it into channels, how to build those channels, obviously takes away from the ability and the time that they have to actually do that work. And then you do want to think about having one solution that can feed all of your platforms, right? So not separate solutions for your OTT channels, another for your mobile channels, and another for your website, but hopefully one solution in place that can feed all of those outputs with different channels and or different options for getting the content to them based on the needs of those viewers from those different solutions. And then finally, you want to think about automation wherever feasible, right? So before I talked a little bit about automating the live workflow based around traffic and production schedules, right? Anytime that you have an option to automate the ingest of content to your streams and then automate the insertion of ads to those streams, you want to think about those opportunities and taking that workload off of your staff so that they can instead be focused on producing more content and feeding more content into your streaming solutions. So here's a little example of kind of a workflow that we've put together with our Fuel platform. A couple things to think about here. Obviously, you do want to think about integration with archives, right? Most of the content that we have at our fingertips today is going to start or end in your archive system. So for obvious reasons, we want to think about having our digital platforms be able to pull from and then push back into our archives. And then, of course, we want to think about integration on the front end or on the viewer end with our CMS, our content management system, as well as integration, if necessary, with your OVP, your online video platform, right? Your workflow, your streaming workflow, needs to fit into your broadcast workflow as closely as possible and your web publishing workflow as natively as possible as well. So now, why am I talking about all this and why am I up here telling you or suggesting to you how to do this? Well, another one of our launch partners, late last year, we started working with the Kohl's Group out of the Pacific Northwest. And with the first station that we started testing these systems and practices with, we put a system in that followed all of these items that I'm suggesting to you. And within the first 60 days of doing nothing but putting these practices in place, we saw some pretty advanced or pretty good metrics changes, right? So over the course of 60 days, without a significant increase in new viewers, we saw a 400+% increase in the number of hours that those viewers in aggregate used the system, again, over a 60-day period, right? In terms of session length or the average time that an individual viewer was engaged with a particular piece of video, before putting these practices into place, we were seeing times in the minute to minute and a half range. After putting these linear streams into place, a 600% increase in average session duration, right? Obviously, that's great, but what that translates into in terms of the real reason we're here, the monetization part of it, is that with that 600% increase in viewer durations, we saw a roughly 10x increase in number of opportunities for ads and ad impressions viewed, right? Again, this is in a 60-day period for putting in those same practices that I've been talking about, and that is without yet making a significant difference in the number of average viewers per day, right? So that was just in changing the experience for the same number of viewers over the course of those 60 days, a roughly 6x increase in average viewer duration and 10x increase in ad opportunities, right? Over time, I would expect that the viewer numbers would increase as well as they get more and more used to having a better experience with that. So I have a number of questions for you guys today, and things that you need to think about as you think about these strategies and think about these workflows and putting them into practice across your newsroom. So first amongst those is how are you doing this today, right? How do we solve the needs of our viewers today? Are we streaming live news? Are we cutting our newscasts up post-air? Are we cutting them up pre-air and being digital first, right? How are they prepared? What's the workflow? Is that limited to staff in the newsroom, and is that limited to being done after your newscast because you're not producing content to go, again, digital first or digital native? And then, as I mentioned before, think about having the integration with your archive piece, right? If your web production team doesn't have access to the same assets that your traditional on-air news production team has, then they're, of course, going to be limited to how quickly they can get content from the news workflow to the digital workflow. What or who are your digital partners today, and what are your options for getting content to and from them, right? I talked a little bit before about plugging into the CMS and the OVP, right? The CMS, again, our content management system. How easily is it to publish content from the news workflow to the web page? Right? Various plugins can help with that. Various solutions can help with that. But you do want to look into automating and easing that transition from the everyday news broadcast workflow to the CMS publish workflow. And the same is true for your online video providers and then publishing out to your OTT channels, right? Hopefully the streams that we have and that we send to our OTT platforms can also feed mobile apps and the web platforms, but those are not necessarily the same. Finally, if you're looking into switching your workflows, we do need to look at what our contracts are with our partners today and what opportunities we have to either change those or to add to those. And then finally, on the sales side, we do want to think about monetization, right? As I mentioned, you do want to think about having the opportunity to both sell ads locally and then fill programmatically for anything that is unsold. But ultimately, your local sales team is going to get you the highest CPM for ad content, right? So that is going to be the primary driver in the most dollars per ad. If your sales team is only selling broadcast ads, then our only opportunity to monetize digitally is with programmatic ad insertion. And then finally, are you open to modifying your workflows today, right? If you're not open to modifying your workflows in your sales process, there's not a lot that we can put into practice here, right? So that needs to be maybe question number one here is, are you willing to implement some of these solutions, and are you willing to, by trial and error, try some of these for your viewers and for your advertisers? Questions? Yep. So that was the previous system was a traditional VOD-based pre-roll, a single asset, and then the viewer would get dumped out to the end of that clip. And they could obviously choose a new clip if they wanted to and repeat the process. Pre-roll, new asset, choose a new clip. So by replacing that kind of VOD bucket with a linear stream, just like the examples here, obviously with a full piece of content, we were seeing a roughly 6x increase in session length and roughly 10x increase in number of ad impressions. Now, there are obviously some differences in how VOD implementations are done, right? Not everyone has a pre-roll. Not everyone stops and ejects, right? Some have like the YouTube-style carousel player. So some of those are better or worse. I would not expect to see a 6x increase every time. But from a traditional pre-roll VOD clip and then let the viewer choose, that's what we're seeing. And that was consistent across now a group of stations. We started with one, but the Coles Group is 6 stations that have now implemented these practices across the group, and those numbers in terms of the revenue difference, or excuse me, the engagement difference and the ad impression difference are holding across the group. As we replaced the streaming solution with a streaming solution that offers the replay, we're also seeing longer times there. Right. One of the keys with the streaming solution that we've put in place is the ability for, again, to kind of give the viewer the time of their choosing. Those viewers are coming in and seeing news replays from the top of the content, with the ability to scrub forward to live if it's live. But as a viewer, if I come into a news broadcast, a 6 p.m. news broadcast at 10 after 6, I don't necessarily want to see the last 20 minutes and lose kind of the A block, which is often the biggest news of our broadcast, right? So give that viewer the opportunity to see that replay in its entirety, right, from the beginning or from the open of the show, and then give them the opportunity to slide forward, right? If I really did want to come in at the 20-minute mark because I'm trying to catch the sports segment today, give them the open of the show and let them choose to slide forward. Don't cut them off and make them watch just the last 10 minutes and skip what may be the most important, locally produced news of the day. Yes, sir. And we have a mic if you...
That's a fantastic increase in viewership. Is that based on research or experience for one company that developed that model?
So that was based on an implementation with the Kohl's Group. So we started with KHQ, which is their station in Spokane, Washington. And those metrics were, the dates are up here. Those metrics were on the 60-day period leading up to putting these practices into place, and then the 60-day period post-launching this. So for their VOD viewers, previous to putting these practices into place, it was a pre-roll followed by the clip, and then eject, and the viewer could choose a new page, a new clip, whatever they wanted. Post, right, it was the linear on-demand style streams where the viewer would come in, would see the content of their choosing, right? Obviously, we want to, if a viewer clicks on a particular news story, that's what always we want them to see first. But then that channel would continue with more content relevant to that particular choice, right? So if it was a news channel, that viewer would continue seeing news content. If it was a sports or other topical channel, the viewer would see the clip of their choice first, and then it would continue with content based around metadata for that particular first clip, right? So I come into a web page and I click on a high school football channel. The first thing I'm going to see is high school football, and then the channel will continue perhaps with other high school football clips.
Two other short questions.
Sure.
The ads in the linear examples we saw, that Trojan is pretty brief, maybe a 10 seconds. It's dropping in 30s and 60s, or kids like that.
Yeah, so the way we configure systems is to give the content producers the opportunity for preference on ads. But from a CPM standpoint or a revenue standpoint, you're getting the same revenue for a 15-second spot as you are for a 30-second spot. And obviously, you can put more 15-second spots in the same ad block, or even better, shorten your ad blocks to keep your viewers longer, right? So the preference is to look at 10 or 15-second spots. You can put 2 or 3 or even 4 of them in a row without losing a viewer, right? Whereas 30-second spots don't generate more revenue, but do have the potential of viewers abandoning content, right? When it's a live or near live replay, of course, we need to, again, match the broadcast schedule, right? I don't want to ever go too late. I don't ever want to cut content. So I do need to be cognizant of when I'm live or near live, I can't get ahead of what's coming out of my production control room, right? But on replay or on file-based assets, I have that opportunity to go to 10 or 15-second spots and shorter ad breaks as opposed to 30 or 60-second spots and then perhaps driving the viewer away. Okay.
The last question. On the replays, people love to share stuff. Do customers
Sure. So often that is kind of upstream of the streaming solution and is more tied to the CMS. So like in our case, we integrate with CMS solutions, and the sharing comes from that, right? The sharing, you do want to think about how you share and not giving the content, so to speak, away to some of the social media sites, right? The Facebooks and the YouTubes of the world are great for kind of socializing content and spreading it around. But if you give the content to the Facebook Lives and the YouTube TVs of the world, they're the ones who are monetizing how and when, right? They decide where the ads go. They decide who the ads are. So in most cases, you do want to send those links or those teases to the Twitters, to the Facebooks of the world, but then allow or think about having your platform be able to drive that video playback once the viewer clicks on the story. Does that make sense?
If you share the whole clip with your ads,
Then the viewer is not right, and the viewer may never know it was your clip. Yeah. Question? Yeah. So right. So that's the goal, right? That's where, again, we kind of coined linear on demand instead of video on demand. But yeah, it should be like a TV channel, right? So when a viewer comes in, they should see content until they run out of content for that channel, right? Where, the reality is we are content producers, right? That doesn't mean we have an unlimited amount of content, right? If a viewer turns it on and doesn't do anything for 24 hours, we're going to be out of news to present to them. But the reality is, view times on the VOD style channels or the linear on demand channels, we see numbers go from 1 to 2 minutes to about 10, right? So if you're producing 10, 20 minutes of new content a day, your viewers are not going to run out of time. On the live and live replay, we tend to see viewers stick to a 30 or so minute maximum, right? They watch an entire news block, and then they're not going to watch a repeat of that news block. So when we think about the file-based channels, we want to think about getting, I'd say, 15 to 20 minutes of content into those channels on a daily basis, but then updating that throughout the day, right? So my weather and traffic content that goes in the morning, we need to think about that expiring on its own within an hour, within half an hour, depending on how often that can get updated. And then my news content that is produced throughout the day, some of it can be, you can think about adding attributes to some of that content, like breaking news. So that content is prioritized and made available to viewers earlier in the start of a playback. But then as it gets older, maybe those attributes come off and that content isn't presented with as high a priority to the same viewers.
Thanks, Andy. That was a great session. Really appreciate it. Thank you.